Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Kat Schwarz joining us here again, fresh off her work trip, aka vacation from Jamaica. So excited to have our friend, our empath, our coach, our mentor, and mom, and amazing woman in front of us today. How you doing, Kat?
Better than ever. As you said, I just got back from the gorgeous country of Jamaica. I'm absolutely in love. It was my second visit, and I cannot wait to go back.
And what was it for? It was for work, right? But
It was. I was part of a mastermind with a wonderful company I'm working with called Underdog Millionaire. So send good juju my way as far as me meeting my financial goals. Because, excuse me, as with any business, funding or project or mission and funding is required, right? So, so it's about really turning these ideas that I experientially tested and starting to get the research behind it, the proof of concept, and really get serious about making this dream a reality for myself.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations. Excited
Thank
to have you
you.
back. You can see, for those of you just on the podcast, not on the Zoomcast, she's got an energy about her, and she's also an empath. She's full of energy. But no, it's like the
And if I could
glow.
project, a Reiki master of masters.
Yeah, congrats on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, introduce yourself. We didn't. Some people don't know who you are yet, Miss Cat,
I
except that she went
know.
on a really cool business trip to Jamaica. Tell us about yourself, please.
Oh, right, that. My name is Kat Schwarz. I am a holistic healer. I am the founder and CEO of Compassionate Healing Services. We offer an array of services, all very unique, from astrology to traditional talk therapy to the services I provide, which is Reiki, mediumship, working with understanding things like crystals and essential oils and the law of attraction, and all in service, and I mean it, of better mental health, of better management of the emotional dysregulation that most of us struggle with, right?
Yeah.
What I really started to see as I was diagnosed with mental illness, because that was a real shock to me. I had been a very, very functional, crazy person. Let's own the word, right?
Yeah,
Whenever we
that's
get a whole episode about it, I
you
think we
did. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I was always a very high achiever in school. I got a 4.0 through graduate school. I really invested myself in my physical therapy career. I became a wife in 2008. I became a mom in 2010. I had another child in 2013. I always got high praise from my employers, and yet, because anxiety was just a way of life for me. I don't think I had ever known a life without anxiety, because I unfortunately had grown up in a very toxically stressful, yes, traumatic,
Yeah.
neglectful, and at times abusive household. And again, that's not uncommon either. So once I started owning these labels of anxious, depressed, even hypomanic, because as I said, I had a 4.0 through grad school. That sounds really impressive, but that meant 14-hour study sessions before each test. I put the work
Mhm.
in. And for me to have the energy to even do that was, to a degree, abnormal, especially when I would just absolutely crash on the other side of that, right? So as I started to own these labels, of traumatized, and then because at one point, as with many people, I say that the universe will give us a nudge, and then it'll give us a shove, and then it'll give us a 2x4 to the face, right?
Yeah.
And my 2x4 to the face was a diagnosis of bipolar disorder after a 6-day manic episode, which had been kicked off by prednisone, a steroid. Anyone prone to mental illness, steroids can be very deadly. It's, again, very scary why or how easily these medications are prescribed with disregard for the very potentially harmful and even lethal side effects. And yet we laugh at things like, well, how about we start with
I
deep breathing?
I take prednisone for like my throat issues to help to swell it, and I didn't know mental health risk associated with. I know they say it's bad for your kidneys or your liver, but I'm Shocked to hear this, but okay. Wow.
Right. I mean, single person is different, right?
True.
Oh no, what a revelation, right? It's almost like we have completely different needs. So why are we just generalizing medications for different disorders,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But again, as I started to say, we laugh at what I consider the real medicine missing on this planet are deep conscious breaths.
True.
It, Reiki, Reiki, this crazy idea that there is this energy around us we can't see. We can accept that about the Wi-Fi around us. Remember that magical synchronicity you
Yes.
and I had early on in our talks about, your son had just brought up the day before, well, mommy, I can't see the Wi-Fi. Am I walking in the Wi-Fi? You're
Smart. Yeah.
Reiki energy, which is just the Japanese term for universal life force energy, is within you and around you at all times. And a simple
Yeah.
attunement can attune you or connect you to this energy in such a powerful way that starting with just Reiki 1, you can heal through your physical hands. With Reiki 2, you can send Reiki from a distance anywhere in the world. And as
Hmm.
a Reiki master, you can start to attune others.
Wow.
And then there's a Reiki master teacher, attune others to Reiki 2, and then master of masters to be able to attune others to mastery. So now I can offer the full spectrum, Reiki 1 through Reiki mastery, attunement for others. And obviously, it's a big part of the healing work that I do, a magical part of the healing work that I do. Because as I said, I was a physical therapist and I was an atheist too
Mm.
for
Yeah.
18 years. You can go back to another episode and listen all about that. And and I used to be one of those people laughing at the idea of deep breaths and Reiki.
Wow.
Literally.
And
I
here you are, the master of the masters. Ah,
it's
how
almost like
ironic, right?
it's almost like people are put on this earth to change and evolve.
Never say never. Exactly. And keep it.
Right?
Yep.
Never say never. I'm
Hmm.
43 years old. It took me, I know my 2x4 to the face was the bipolar diagnosis, of course, triggered me to be put on mood stabilizers. That's the general treatment for what they consider bipolar. Um, and the mood stabilizers were so harsh on my system, and there were so many awful side
Ah,
effects that it sunk me very quickly into a state of such deep depression that suicide was such a
mm,
loud, persistent voice in my head. And as a mom, I
ah,
knew I couldn't do that. But at the same time, I really didn't know what else to do because I had been following the traditional recommendations in the form of the medications and many SSNRIs and SSRIs prior to that. I went through a partial hospitalization program. I was unable to work. I was taking Xanax just to function. If I didn't take Xanax every 6 hours, I was vomiting. This
ah,
The depression was so physical. And again, I actually think it's ridiculous we separate physical and mental health because I've never been so physically ill or in so much physical pain as when I was depressed, that
yeah.
severely depressed. Just as a physical therapist, I watched so many people battle physical battles, whether that was a stroke or an accident or surgery, and fall into a depression because duh. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're inextricably linked, and yet we try to separate them, and it's ridiculous. So my background, so really it took me getting to suicidal at
Mm,
37 years old as a mom for me to work with my psychiatrist who did me the absolute favor and privilege of listening to me, even
hmm.
though I'd been diagnosed as bipolar. I think that's one of the tricks of the matrix, I'll call it, is when we label someone as crazy, we give
Then
them a
that's, yep.
diagnosis of crazy, whether
Oh
it's
gosh. Yeah.
bipolar, whether it's borderline personality disorder, like my fiance has been diagnosed with, whether it's schizophrenia, which I've told you my view of that is clairaudience.
Yep. Correct.
I I view mental illness as spiritual giftedness, one and the same. And that's what a part of what makes me so unique. So yes, it did take me evolving out of my own limiting beliefs about energy. Even as I went to it, the first thing I did, well, the first thing I did, if you go back to last episode, is I started understanding the concepts and the complete paradigm shift beyond intuitive eating, how dieting is the problem and not the solution. And I just started believing that I had this innate wisdom in my
Mm,
body, that I could listen to her, right? And I
cool.
had and I didn't have to look outside of myself for some diet plan or trainer or even doctor who knew better than my own body. So that was really radical. But then, and that got me into a yoga studio, not for weight loss as all the other classes had been before it, and I really
Mhm.
like it, but just for mental health and learning how to meditate and learning, which was very hard for me when I first started. If you sit down to meditate and you can close your eyes and keep them closed,
Yeah.
congratulations, you did better than me on my first meditation, because my eyes were just fluttering with
Ah,
anxiety and I couldn't even keep them closed. I didn't feel safe in my body, much less my environment, right? So, I validate how difficult these things are when you are in an active mental health struggle. And but by forcing myself to do it and then thinking, wow, why is sitting still and breathing consciously making me feel better than Xanax? Why is it making me feel better than alcohol? Let's explore this more deeply. So I decided as a physical therapist to enhance my education by becoming a yoga teacher. And even at that time, I was rolling my eyes when it came to chakras and energy because I wasn't there for that,
yeah,
and still wasn't ready to give up these really limiting beliefs around all of that, this woo stuff,
got
right?
it. Mhm.
And then it was after I became a yoga teacher, and then after I even started my business, which at that time I only called Zen Mom Yoga, because I didn't see myself going beyond teaching yoga to fellow stressed out moms, as a healthier alternative to these wine clubs, perhaps, right? So, and then 3 months after I started my business, I crashed into my own suicidal depression, and I wasn't able to
Ah,
work at all, even in the realm of the physical therapy, until 2018. I underwent a wonderful DBT program, which is another philosophy, a brilliant philosophy, that I follow and help to teach to others. Um, I can't believe her name is escaping me right now. I know her first name is Marsha. Someone will know what I mean, who I
it's
mean, but
okay.
DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. And the woman who created the program back in the early 70s suffered herself with borderline symptoms and severe suicidality. And this was a program in which she healed herself without medication. So, and a lot of it is based in the same principles of mindfulness, and so and this acknowledgement, we are in fact more than these physical bodies. We are in fact spiritual beings having a human experience. And if you have to stay on the science route of things, let's go with quantum physics. Everything is energy, everything is vibration, including us, including these physical objects. So it was in the integrating of my understanding of my physical therapy education, my yoga education, intuitive eating, and then having a very rapid and unexpected spiritual awakening at the end of 2018, in which I went to a mediumship workshop to say, hey, why are you lying and saying you have the ability to
Ah,
see dead people when
yeah.
that's not a thing? And I went to go reconnect with my dead dad, sarcastically, and sure enough, he shocked the hell out of me, and I felt his energy on every level of my being. I understood internally that we were on some sort of frequency together. He told me that, I was a healer and I could do what he did, that I should stick with this, and that Reiki was a very important part of my path. And then he, without a shadow of a doubt, reconnected me to my father after 18 years, after his passing. And there was such specificity to the details. I mean, that day changed my life forever. And I had the privilege financially to really dive into his what he said, Reiki and
Mhm.
intuitive healing. I became a Thai massage therapist for a short while before COVID. Um, and then
Wow.
to expand my personal understanding of trauma, because the diagnosis that ultimately landed for me and actually helped me understand what it was happening and how I could then turn the ship around was a diagnosis that isn't even in the DSM yet, called complex PTSD. And the most succinct way I've ever heard it is PTSD is a terrible event and complex PTSD is a terrible life. And it's all relational trauma. You know, it's trauma that occurred in the context of the relationships or the families or the marriages that you entrusted yourself, your heart into, and your heart and you were abused and neglected and dismissed. You know, my brother told me every day, no one cares what you have to say. And then I was in a marriage that demonstrated it for almost 17 years.
Yeah.
So, so it really was about me changing my own thoughts and beliefs because beliefs are just thoughts you
They
think again
are.
and again.
Yeah.
Beliefs are just thoughts you picked up somewhere along the way that you have just reinforced again and again and again and again. And it is creating your world, it's creating your reality. You do create your own reality with your thoughts. And the universe or the law of attraction is going to bring to you what you think about, not whether that's wanted or unwanted, right? You are that powerful. So, that's really the history of how, once I found that psychiatrist that listened to me
Yeah.
and said, you know what, you're telling me you don't want to be on any of this, because she's the one that validated the diagnosis of complex PTSD. And then she's the one who told me that cannabis, which is a medication I had been secretly using on the side because I felt so much shame around it. But once I whispered to her, you know what, doctor, everything you've given me has made me feel worse, and cannabis makes me feel better. And she was like, well, that makes sense because cannabis is approved for trauma here in New Jersey. You can get a medical marijuana card. And with that alone, I essentially said, please, wean me safely off of everything else. And as soon as I did that, which was a short, within a week's time, I had the depression that had been so heavy lifted about 70%. And at that point, she said, you know what? It really feels like you know what you're doing here. I'm here if you need me. But she became more of a support system and a consultant for me rather than someone who was prescribing me what to do.
That's so
And it was
important.
life-saving, as was the money that it took me in order to invest in all these other personal development, spiritual development, and professional development, courses and things of that nature. So, and then when I did finally have the courage to leave the marriage that was no longer healthy for either of us, which was in early 2020, that's when I met my fiance, Alexandra, and she had been through such severe trauma growing up, as she's a
Yeah, you
survivor of human
told me.
trafficking from Chile, one of the Chilean children of silence. She was trafficked to an abusive family, and she experienced severe trauma throughout her entire life. And while initially, like any other couple, we had a honeymoon phase, and it really did feel like the universe had handpicked each other. Um, what that meant was we were about to go through a really hellish journey with her prolonged suicidality, because with the borderline personality disorder that resulted directly from her extremely abusive childhood, she developed, of course, extremely severe mental illness. And there's a 10% suicidality rate with BPD. And of course, many, many more attempt, right?
Yeah.
So she went through a very prolonged crisis where, again, kind of like me, as much as she knew she didn't want to leave as a mother herself and having found the love of her life, it just didn't seem possible for her to stay. And there was so much triggering uh, situations going on within the relationship where I kind of became my worst self and lost the patience and the love and the things that you really need to hold on to,
Wow.
with a partner. And any relationship is hard, much less two people who have had moderate to severe relationship trauma, right? So, but we made it through. And again, it took a lot of financial privilege, took a lot of looking outside of conventional methods such as ketamine infusions, which is a privilege just to even be near somewhere that offers these extremely expensive treatments, right? So, I'm looking into, as a practitioner now, with working with people with mental illness, looking into the benefits of not just cannabis, but here in New Jersey, ketamine is readily available, as well as, there's actually a company called Mind Bloom. I'm gonna be trying them out for myself, that they send ketamine pills to it's a very safe guided process. But, these, psilocybin or magic mushrooms, right? MDMA or ecstasy, Molly, all the same chemical compound, even things like peyote and ayahuasca. There's so much potential for the treatment of severe mental illness, addictions. We have to, eating disorders, right? We talked last time about how eating disorders are the deadliest of all mental illnesses. That was very surprising.
It sure
It
was to
was
myself and sure a lot of listeners as well. Yeah.
Right. So when I talk about my goal of preventing suicide, I'm talking about people who've been severely or even moderately, as I was, traumatized, and have never gotten any real care, support, or even validation of that fact. Helping to increase access to medications that are extremely effective and currently either illegal or highly stigmatized for reasons that are obviously beneficial to the pharmaceutical companies who profit off of these other medications, which any of those us who have been on the more traditional mental health medications, from Xanax and Klonopin or benzodiazepines, you can die just from withdrawal from benzodiazepine, highly likely to cause seizures. Um, Mood stabilizers had such severe effects. It didn't feel for me, I can't speak for everybody. And for some people who've been diagnosed with bipolar, they're life-saving and they're very happy on their medication. I'm not anti-medicine, but I am, and I've said this so many times in our time together, I am anti making medicine our first and only line of defense.
Yeah.
You
So
and
true.
the only thing that's covered, I can go to the pharmacy and get Alex or Xanax, and there's no copay. I go to ketamine to get the thing that really helps her and is far safer. It's being administered by a doctor in a doctor's office, and I'm shelling out at least $600 if she's had a therapy session along with it,
Wow.
or 50 just for the medication alone. For the average person, healing is a privilege. We had a whole episode around that, and that's not right.
No.
You shouldn't require financial privilege in order to live, especially
Yep.
when so much of what I know and teach is in line with the indigenous wisdom that was here before Columbus, murdered, raped, and pillaged,
Yeah.
right? And then everyone was colonized by the British. So, it's very important to me to be a a voice for radical change when it comes to how we're viewing mental illness, how we're viewing trauma, and the large scale problem of that. As I said, the CPTSD diagnosis that made the only one that made sense for me and actually helped me not only get the medication that saved my life, but the if trauma caused these symptoms, would the healing of trauma eliminate the symptoms? Yes, the answer is yes. I haven't had a bipolar episode since 2017.
Wow. Amazing.
As I said, I believe it was just kicked off by a prednisone episode, and they were very quick to write me a script that could have killed me. Instead of paying for me, perhaps, to go to, you know, to whether it was DBT, right? DBT, I had mentioned how much it helped me. I went through a 14-month course of DBT on a weekly basis. It cost me a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? And there are ways, and part of me being a voice for radical change is also attracting the money, attracting the investors, attracting uh, like-minded, heart-centered healers and teachers who can add to this. I mean, I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I'm just trying to build the infrastructure for the pieces of the puzzle to kind of all fill in. And that looks like, in the long term, that looks like an app creation, right? With making these concepts, these teachings much more accessible and diverse, and because everyone learns differently, everyone comes from different cultural
Yeah.
background. It's a beautiful thing. So app creation that looks like actually introducing or co-collaborating with others who have curricula for the schools that really address social emotional learning in a daily way, right? Or making kindness a real practice among your student body, and inclusion a real practice in your student body. I believe it's Dylan's Wings is one of the nonprofits that was born out of the Sandy Hook tragedy.
Yeah.
And um and their goal is to find those kids in school who are isolated, right? And show them love, because I've said this too, who is more deserving of love, of unconditional love, than someone who has never had it a day in their lives, right? It's not an accident when people do things that we consider to be monstrous, and they are. There have probably been years, if not decades, of cries for help and of love, and it's in the chronic not finding of it or finding the exact opposite of it that hardens these hearts, right? And really, my definition of evil is the human ego. And then that's
Hmm.
what narcissism is. And narcissists are among the most dangerous people on our planet. And it's because they're so blinded by their own selfish needs and this idea that we are somehow separate from one another. That's what the ego will convince you of, that we're separate. The spirit or the soul knows we are one. Was we are all
Beautiful.
coming from one stream. And it might take us a lifetime or 50,000 years in the case of humanity to come to that conclusion, but we're here. Enough of us are here on this leading edge and seeing what you can't unsee. Once you tune into synchronicity, once you tune into signs, once you, like me, can there's an offering on my website. My most unique and popular offering is called Spiritual Private Investigation Services. I've offered it to you, Jill. We just haven't gotten a chance to
Yes.
connect with
Connect.
it,
We
but you'll
will.
see for yourself
Hmm.
how stunningly obvious and accurate, once you tune into the vibration of where your loved one is now and clear the grief from your heart chakra that they're no longer in their physical body, you can open your eyes to the signs they're constantly sending you that, like in the case of my father, can easily make me laugh out loud or cry some,
Cry. I get it.
right?
Yep.
And I welcome all of it, right?
Right.
So, because it's so beautiful to realize there is no such thing as death. There's only physical death. But once you have had that death experience, you become part of this oneness of energy in which you can really, where you are now, our loved ones are not sitting on a cloud waiting for us to die. They're right here right now waiting for you to live.
Yeah.
Waiting for
Beautiful.
you to follow all your dreams, and don't repeat the mistakes of your ancestors and your lineage. Take the best parts of them and leave the rest, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of my favorite things came from a tweet, and it said, tradition is peer pressure from dead people.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Right. And I think that can pretty much describe every institution that needs changing, right? We're just doing things because it's the way it's always been done, not because it makes logical sense or not because it's effective. And I'll just end on, why do I choose to do this heavy work of suicide prevention? It's not just because um I experienced it personally, not just with myself, but with my partner, and now so many clients. But because the problem is getting worse, whether you want
yeah.
to talk about it or not. It's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse until we change what we're doing. Isn't that the definition of insanity, right?
Sure is.
The same thing again and again and again and expecting a different result. That's Einstein's quote. So, let's just stop doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Let's change what we're doing radically and fundamentally, and then watch all these things that we've, become hopeless around, or or scratching our heads of why these problems are getting bigger, and watch them actually um start to find solutions instead of just amplifying the problem, or even worse, perpetuating the problem.
Beautiful. And Kat, we're out of time. I apologize. Thank you
Well,
for being here. I promise I'll text you
thank you
soon. We'll
for
get
having
together.
me.
Remind
Yeah.
everyone how we can reach you, please.
Absolutely. My website is CHS, the first three letters of Compassionate Healing Services, yoga.com. My phone number is 856-334-0018. You can find me on Instagram at Compassionate Healing Services and email info@compassionatehealingservices.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You have a
Thank you for this
fantastic day.
opportunity. It's been
Thank
wonderful.
you. Looking forward to the next time we speak, and it'll be, in Zoom like this, but privately. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Bye,
Bye.
sweetheart.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.